Hi, I'm Rob Smith, the CEO and founder of Lionfish Tech Advisors. And with me, I have several people with me. Gary Robbins, the CEO and founder of Four Quarters. Roberta Gamble, the, lead analyst for forecasters. And a couple fish from Lionfish, Tom Kroll and Scott Nelson. I'm glad you could join. We want to talk to you today about really how the pyramid comes together. And in order to understand that, you need to understand lionfish. I founded Lionfish about 4.5 years ago with the idea for real simple to provide vendors actionable, targeted advice to be able to say, hey, I think you should do this. And that you could have essentially a former analyst on your payroll to give you deep level advice that you couldn't get out of any other analyst firm. And that became so successful for us that we started building our own competitive intelligence tools. And out of that came the pyramid, what we're going to talk about today.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for the intro. I want to give you some background on me personally, and then I'll tell you a little bit about Four Quarters. But prior to starting Four Quarters, I spent a few careers worth at Frost and Sullivan, 27 years to be exact, where I started the brand demand division. And basically, what I did there was I leveraged the brand of Frost and Sullivan and the analysts of Frost and Sullivan to build marketing solutions for our clients. The value proposition at Four Quarters is that we are a human-powered marketing agency. And so we offer a candy store of different marketing solutions. And you can see a little bit about that there: buyer insights, ABM, content, demand, virtual events, in-person events. But instead of leveraging a single brand, a single analyst, we have a network of analysts and analyst firms that we have the ability to tap into to build these marketing solutions. Lionfish is one of those on our network. They are an important partner of the network. And earlier in the year, we found ourselves walking down the same road in a desire to build a next generation benchmark model or buyer's guide. Rob shared details on the aquarium. We shared details on the pyramid, and the rest was history. I want to introduce Roberta Gamble. She's a chief research analyst for forecasters and co-architect behind the pyramid.
Great. Thank you, Gary. And thanks, Rob. Thanks so much for having us here today. We're really excited about this webinar. So Forecasters, as Gary alluded to, is an independent research arm of Four Quarters. We're a content hub for the analyst community, where independent analysts and analyst firms can publish their future-focused insights and content. It gives them a platform to be able to provide information to the market, to decision makers, IT and other executive decision makers who can go to our platform and really read up on new and interesting developments in the industries that they participate in. So we, as Gary mentioned, came together with Lionfish to build and develop and now launch the pyramid. Wanted to talk briefly about why we created it. We're all very familiar with many of the analyst benchmark models out there. We've recently at Forecasters been launching, we recently launched a CIO survey and a vendor survey to better understand some of the challenges that people have expressed or some of the perceptions that they have with current analyst benchmark models. Some of the things that we've heard are there's concerns perhaps with analyst bias. Some of these models tend to focus more on large established markets and feature large established vendors, which is fine, but we felt that there was also space in the market to have emerging markets and new entrants also be participating in these analyst benchmark models. Some concerns we heard were about, the perception of pay to play or analyst bias, and also that maybe the data was a bit outdated. Some of these models are only published every year or every couple years, and so those were all some of the things that we heard. And we came together with the idea of using the power of Lionfish and the ingenuity of forecasters and Four Quarters to create this. So before I give away too much, I'll hand it back to Gary to talk a little bit about what we'll be discussing today.
Right. So what we're going to cover today on the webinar is Roberta's going to actually walk through the pyramid, everything, anything you need to know in terms of how to decode it, really how to understand it, and what you're looking at as it relates to how organizations are plotted and charted. Rob's going to talk to you a little bit about the aquarium and how that ultimately generates a pyramid. The aquarium are truly the bricks that build the pyramid. After Rob talks through details on the aquarium, you're going to see a sneak peek of 4 new markets that we're releasing today. 4 quarters, we are the exclusive licensor and distributor of the pyramid, meaning the promotion and licensing. So I'm going to share a little bit about how you can leverage those details and what those details look like. And then finally, we'll take some Q&A from you, the audience. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to Roberta, who is going to talk to you a little bit about how to read the pyramid.
Great. Thanks, Gary. So when we look at the pyramid here, we have a couple different things I want to talk about. First are the 2 axes. So we have the performance index and we have the strategic index. And this is how companies, we leverage these 2 indices to chart them on the pyramid. So the performance index measures market presence, it measures performance, sales, and so forth. The strategic index looks at a broad and dynamic portfolio and cutting edge solutions. So those are the 2 main axes that we're looking at, these 2 indices. So how you read it, oops, I think I did that twice. So now when you're looking at the pyramid, you'll also find that there are several different segments within the pyramid. You have the top of the pyramid. Those are the organizations that excel both in their success in the market as well as their strategy and the breadth of their portfolio. But really anywhere on the pyramid, just being on the pyramid denotes excellence. So if you find an organization that is still in the center, but perhaps more towards the left, this will often indicate strong sales, strong delivery, established vendors. These are really solid choices for buyers. And really what the pyramid is we have created it as a buyer's guide, a CIO, CISO buyer's guide. Along similar lines, but more towards the right, you have what we call the mavericks. These companies are going to have wide-ranging portfolios. They're really pushing the boundaries. They're still rather well established, but they're really the ones where they're valuable for buyers who are looking for a lot of new technologies and a lot of new features, wide-ranging products. Maybe they themselves have a very a client base that needs the hottest new thing all the time. And so they're going to need suppliers and vendors that can accommodate that. Now, what's also interesting, as I mentioned a moment ago, is that we also want to look at new entrants, whether those be existing companies that are new to the market or as likely, if not more likely, startups and new companies in the industry. And at this tier, we have the breakout sparks. These are companies that are doing really well, perhaps with fewer solutions, but considering that they're a new vendor in the market, they have impressive growth in sales, great customer success within the solution or customer category that they're playing in. And their counterpart on the innovation side, on the strategic side, are the innovative sparks. And those innovative sparks, you can think of them as those that are really bursting on the scene with the next breakthrough technology or killer value proposition. And the last point that I'm going to make here is that we're also looking at the triangles themselves. And this is a new product and things are evolving, but you can think of when you see the triangles, if they're pointing up, they're solid, they've been doing well or even a little better since the last iteration. By the way, it is something that we are going to be publishing every 6 months, so this is a more frequent model that will be published than many others that we see in the industry. If conversely, if the triangle's pointing down, then perhaps they've declined a bit in their position since the previous edition. And then I really want to point out the stripes, and those are the textures there. And those are what we call difference makers. And you're going to get an example of what a difference maker, what the category means in a moment when we look at some new pyramids that are being revealed today. Basically, a difference maker, regardless of where they are on the pyramid, those are the ones that are doing really well in one critical metric within that industry. So, for example, in one industry, it might be extremely critical to have excellent customer experience or user interface. In another one, it might be their ability to integrate with legacy systems. So, there's that one critical metric within that market, and those companies that really excel at that, wherever they are on the pyramid, those are outfitted as or identified as the difference makers. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the power behind the pyramid itself, the aquarium.
Thank you.
Rob?
Thank you. So, as I said, when you get a bunch of former analysts together, we want to automate some of the work we do. We get asked the same questions over and over again. And it happened in our former lives, and it happens, in our current life. So we thought, what if we built a system to be able to do that? And when we started designing the aquarium, first we were doing all kinds of work manually. And honestly, it was untenable to be able to keep up with vendors, especially in new markets. Um, but what we found was that manual wasn't good enough, but then we tried AI, and AI wasn't good enough. AI, we found the data was anywhere, depending on how new the market is, between 50% and 80% accurate. Most of the time, 70 to 80%. And the core problem with that, though, is even that data that was accurate was old. And because it was old, the aquarium just didn't know anything current. And it wasn't good enough. So we came up with a hybrid solution. We use AI and scraping to get to over 200 different sources, and we add more sources every day. Every review site you can think of, everything like Glassdoor and LinkedIn, financial results, PR Newswire, you name it, we pull it all. And every single solitary day, a market manager goes through and at least once a day adds new data to the aquarium or rejects new data from being added to the aquarium and adjusts based on how the world has evolved. Now, sometimes we end up having to update multiple times during the day. For example, in my world, when RSA happens, the big security trade show, um, news happens during the course of the day. We have to update 3 or 4 times during the day. And but the funny thing is, Gary said it. He came to me a few months ago and said, "Hey, you have all this data in the aquarium. Why aren't you actually publishing ratings?" And like, well, that's a really good idea. We had talked about it a couple years ago in Lionfish, and we just could never come up with a system. And I really give forecasters and four quarters a ton of credit because they came up with a really unique industry different rating system. And what you'll see is every single value in the pyramid comes straight from the aquarium. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But the aquarium is a lot more than just the pyramid and pyramid generation. Half my clients who use the aquarium care about one feature and one feature only, and that's battle cards. And our battle cards are pretty unique in that not only can you generate battle cards automatically, you versus vendor X, but you can also do it by job function. So you can have a battle card, you against your competition, targeted just for the CFO, just for the CISO, just for whatever job function that you need, chief data officer, whoever the salesperson may be talking to, and you can automatically send those battle cards to Salesforce, to your SharePoint. It was funny because we had some clients at Lionfish contract to us to help them build battle cards, but then they struggled with actually getting current battle cards to the Salesforce and keeping them current, and we solved that. Now, another huge problem that every single solitary vendor faces is dealing with analyst surveys. And I don't just mean the major ones, I mean the minor ones too. And take, for example, my former employer, they've said they're going to have 300 Magic Quadrants next year. Now, if you're a larger vendor, good luck responding to that. When you consider each survey would typically take weeks to respond to, we built a tool so that you can upload your survey from, we've tried 6 different analyst firms. And using the data in the aquarium, which isn't just our data, you can also add your own personal internal data to it because you have your own proprietary instance and have the system auto-complete the answers for you. Now, of course, it's not perfect, but it gets you about 80–90% of the way there. So instead of taking days to fill out a survey, you can actually do it in a few hours to get a first cut. And coming back to the pyramid came out of a real-time SWOT generation we do, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, combined with detailed comparisons of a whole bunch of scores I'll talk about in a second. And on that, really, we have a dashboard overview where you can see everything at one time with including scores and current pyramids for a particular market. But now let me talk about the scores themselves, because I think that's really what you care about. How did we come up with a pyramid? Well, first off, one of my biggest problems I always have with any of the existing prior survey tools out there, the reports are biased. There's always this X factor of an analyst. And we didn't like that. We want every single vendor, every single product to be scored exactly the same way. Now, we have 52 data points. Could go up, could go down. Maybe sometime we exclude some in areas across market presence, sales, customer experience, product functionality, innovation, and the company themselves. Now, those 52 points include things like, for example, influencer score. Well, maybe you have an established market where you really don't care about influencers, say something like, oh, CCAS, versus something like CNAP, which are super hot and you really care about what analysts and influencers think. Well, this is the weight will matter, so we can adjust the weights. But we found that still wasn't enough. And so for every market that has a pyramid and every market we cover in the aquarium, we have custom market specific data points. For example, for DLP, there's AI security and classification in there, which I'll talk about in a minute. And those points are also weighted on importance for that market. And you take, typically we have at least 10 data points for every market that has a pyramid. So you take those 62 scores, you weight them, and then all the triangles are calculated relative to each other, and bam, there's a pyramid. So I just alluded to CCAS. CCAS, my genius in this case is Scott Nelson. Scott, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rob. The CCAS stands for Contact Center as a Service. It's basically the cloud-based systems that help companies manage all the ways that customers connect with them, phone calls, emails, chats, social media. A fairly mature market, but one that's going through a lot of changes right now as new media become available and the role of AI increasingly plays in this space. As you can see down the side, these are some of the vendors that we're looking at for the current pyramid. Our difference maker attribute that we're looking at in this space is the integration with CRM ERP systems as well as the broader ecosystem, since it's critical in a contact center to be able to link to all these systems, and usually you don't have the luxury of being with a unified solution. So CCAS is coming out this week and will be one that we expect there'll be a lot of interest in the marketplace.
Thanks, Scott. But Roberta, if you can just go back a second. So you may notice a little difference here over what you saw last week or what you might have seen from other pyramids we published. There's no names on this one. And because there's no names on this one is because we don't feel we want to disclose this information. However, anybody who licensed the pyramid can certainly publish it with their name or other people's names, and Gary will talk about that in a second. And if you have the aquarium, at any given time, you can see any name and any triangle and who they are. But it's really important to note that the three we published last week with the names on it were so that you, the vendor community, can understand how triangles work and how they're in the pyramid and see examples of completed pyramids. And I'll allow Gary to talk more about that more. Now, for CNAP, I call on one of the co-inventors of the acronym, Mr. Tom Krall. Please.
Hi, thanks very much for the intro. So CNAP, Cloud Native Application Protection Platforms, was really an evolution from traditional point infrastructure, cloud security tools, all the acronyms, and we got sick of it. So, believe it or not, we invented a new acronym to try and get rid of and consolidate some of the other ones. We have CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management. We've got cloud workload protection platforms, agent-based, agentless, Kubernetes, containers are everywhere. We've got multiple clouds with multiple different security standards. And we have application security testing sitting in another bucket here with all of these different silos of risk that all have some ephemeral risk score. But business leaders needed something that created actionable, prioritized alerts, and security teams needed to know if I've only got half an hour to do security stories, what do I need in context to give me the priority that I need? Nobody wants to be a security story company. They want to be pushing value out the door. So in comes CNAP. So first, it provides a unified visibility, no more blind spots. It's like having a security camera on all your inbound and outbound pathways to your valuable assets. Second, it offers intelligent risk prioritization. Like I said, not all security issues are equal, so CNAP uses advanced analytics to map out actual attack paths and show you which vulnerabilities attackers could realistically exploit to reach your crown jewels, even if your password isn't literally Louvre. This reduces alert fatigue by about 70% and lets your teams focus, and it gives seamless collaboration, so developers get security feedback directly in their workflow. Now, CNAP is in the consolidation phase. We've gone over the startups and quite a lot of the hype, and now it's starting to produce dependable results. And I'm now back at the coalface every day as a consultant and architect and analyst as well. So the difference maker that I've put in this market is actually the integration of all these components or sources of risk data. And integration allows all the exotic features like AI security that people like to talk about. But most people don't get the basics right and continue to have these blind spots, issues accessing multiple data sources, as well as obscure licensing models that hold them back. So you can't have these more advanced features unless you get the basics right. And from my practical and current experience, this is what matters most to customers and leads to some surprising results in the pyramid rankings. So if you want to know more, watch this space. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. So back to Scott for UCAS. Also interesting and well established.
UCAS, Unified Communications as a Service. What we're doing right now is UCAS. This is the cloud-based area that works on how people inside and outside a company communicate. It's a not as mature market as CCAS, one that's got a lot of entrants coming into it. You can see the vendors listed on the side here. The difference maker attribute that we looked at here is extensibility and the ecosystem that produces. Because we all know what it's like. If you're using a system such as this, you want to access a third application to show somebody or to do something from within the session, and you can't link to it. That's why extensibility is very important in this space, and one where we see the leaders are the ones that are going to really expand that ecosystem most aggressively. It's an area we expect a lot of changes in. This is one where the pyramid will be very dynamic, and it'll be interesting to see how the marketplace evolves over the next couple of years.
Thanks, Scott. So now it's one for me because I couldn't let my guys just all have fun. Enterprise data loss prevention, it's such a well-established market that has really actually evolved a lot just recently. Data classification has always been a problem to be able to accurately classify stuff, but with the addition of AI, it's been a real difference maker and is the difference maker in this pyramid. But that's been driven because, ransomware attacks have focused on stealing data rather than just encrypting it. And the diversification of data stores to cloud has increased the prominence of DLP solutions. Your data is all over the place, so you have to know where it is to be able to track it, to be able to classify it, and hopefully control it and keep ransomware and thieves away from touching it. And so this is a market we chose to publish because it actually is ripe for radical change. There's a couple standard vendors out there, and you see we only have one Spark in this space. But I could see startups appearing in this market who are offering and using AI in new ways to be able to find data better and classify data better. Because in the end of the day, the aquarium is about finding data and then using a person to classify it. And so DLP is quite interesting for us to follow, and we will continue to follow it real closely and see how it evolves. Now, I gave a little hint about this. If you remember last week, if you saw any of our LinkedIn posts or if you saw our webinar last week, we put out the pyramid for anti-ransomware. Now, industries change and move, full stop. Nothing ever stands still. Everything changes all the time. And so, as I said, we updated the aquarium every day. And I expect triangles to move. I don't expect them to stay static. If they stayed static, there'd be no news, there'd be no change. And everything's relative. And so what you see here is our published pyramid versus a screenshot from the aquarium from yesterday. And so you see there's a couple movements here in case one pretty big towards the right to improve strategic index because of the announcements they put out and because of some other things that evolved in the market. And so this is really what we're talking about with the aquarium, in that the pyramid, we're going to publish twice a year. But if you want to know at any given time where you are, how you're doing, how you relate to anyone else as a vendor, if you have an aquarium license, you can see it, and not only see it, but say, why did we get a 7 in social media while they had an 8? Or what about our company stability? They had a 6 and we had a 9. Why did they only have a 6? And so this is what the value we're giving. The aquarium is, and the pyramid itself is opaque. We may be made out of bricks, but our bricks are transparent. And with that, I pass it back to Gary.
So last week, again, we released 3 pyramids in full, details included. And there were a lot of inquiries as to, what can I do with this? How can I leverage it? How can I share it? And so I want to talk to you a little bit about licensing and promotion. So as part of our program, as part of our packages, we offer reprints, branded reprints. Again, we are posting and publishing these pyramids every 6 months. So that is quite unique, I think, in the market from what we understand. In addition, included with the reprint will be a market report showcasing why it is and how it is, where you charted, where you landed, maybe top of the pyramid, maybe a maverick. So we're going to explain that in the market report, which you will also receive. You'll also receive an analyst quote from Lionfish. You'll get a badge or logo that you can use in promotional material. Plus, we'll give you approved copy for a press release as well. Last but not least, as part of the promotional packages, you will receive quarters. Quarters are a unit of currency, and that unit of currency can be used either to be leveraged for the aquarium or for additional marketing solutions or tactics to promote the pyramid. I think I want to show you an example of what something like that might look like. So this is a branded reprint, so you can see that. But also important to note that you may request an analyst briefing So you may request a briefing with a Lionfish representative to share more on your organization. Definitely recommend that. That doesn't guarantee a placement on the pyramid, but again, always good to have as much information as possible. I want to, last but not least, I want to note that come next week, the pyramids that have been released will be posted on forecasters.com. We will post all pyramids on Forecasters, and you will see kind of, again, a detailed description as to how to read the pyramid and the different sections of the pyramid where organizations land. So with that, I will kick it back to Rob.
Thanks, Gary. So what's next? Well, as Gary said, we're publishing pyramids every 6 months. And what markets are we going to cover? So I originally talked about, maybe you heard me say it or read it on LinkedIn, we wanted to have 20 pyramids by the first week of December. Well, it's not 20 pyramids. We're going to end up with a lot more. Next week, one of the pyramids we're publishing will actually be 4 pyramids. Next week, we're publishing MDR, Managed Detection and Response. And if you know anything about the MDR space, you'll know that it's a very regional business. So we're going to actually have a pyramid for North America MDR vendors, a European MDR vendors, and an Asia Pac MDR vendors. But we also think people need to know global services. And as such, we will have a global pyramid as well for MDR. And then that's, not the only trick in our bag. We are going to publish several others next week too. We are hoping next week, and of course, everything depends on market research being done, to get out BPO and also private mobile networks next week as well. And certainly last but not least, AI digital transformation services. In addition, coming up, we have identity governance and administration. We have AI dev. We have DSPM. We have authentication IAM, and many, many, many more coming down the pipe. And so as such, if you see a market that you think is interesting and being underserved by other rating systems, and you think this is evolving and isn't just static and the same old 6, 7 vendors who aren't moving anything and there's change going on, please reach out to us. We want to cover it. We want to cover new hot spaces. For example, XDR. We are right now figuring out how we're going to do XDR, because there's self-managed XDR, there's outsourced XDR, there's 100 different vendors who say they do XDR. So we may end up with XDR having literally 10 different pyramids. And we're trying to figure that out. And this is where we need your input. But certainly, last but not least, if it's an interesting space and if it's a new space, that gets our attention right away. That's top of the list. And as Gary said, we'll take vendor briefings from anyone. We are not pay to play in any way, shape, or form. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear what's interesting in your world. And you feeding us just helps us be better. And I think Roberta said it. The pyramid is an evolution. This is only our 2nd week publishing. And so as such, we want to get better. And for that, we need your feedback. And so with your feedback, please type some questions in the chat. And the very first question in the chat is for Gary. And that is, Gary, you mentioned that pyramids are going to be republished on your Forecaster site. Will they have names next to them, since the ones you showed don't have names?
So on the site, we'll actually have the market that's being covered. It will list all the organizations that are on the pyramid. They will not be plotted again. To see a plotted pyramid and to use a plotted pyramid, it would be licensed. So,
There'll
but
be a
all
short
of them
write-up.
will be located. Yeah, go ahead.
And with a short write-up about the market.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, one of the things I don't think you caught it in the write-up is that if you do license the pyramid, my market leader will write a write-up for the vendor for a page about the vendor themselves in that market. And there'll be the market write-up as well as a single paragraph about every other vendor in that market. And it'll be up to whoever licenses the pyramid if they want to choose to republish that or not, but that's included. Next question's from me. For your AI scraping, if vendors want to give you guidance on what to scrape for their specific products, do you have a way for vendors to submit recommendation sources? Of course. Please, 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 please. We are looking and scraping your entire site, especially your support site, your documentation. We're looking for manuals, information, anything you can possibly give us. That said, we only have access to public information. If you have an aquarium license on your own personal instance of the aquarium, you can upload whatever you want, preferably NDA stuff that I will never see because it's your own personal instance with data stored in it that none of us have access to. Next question. Pondering, as I reflect on your statement about existing evaluation methodologies having analyst bias, your methodology seems to be pure data aggregation process of removing that bias. Do you feel that changes the weight value of an analyst quote? Is the role of the analyst in your methodology to just validate the data your AI scrapes? No, it's more than that. AI isn't smart. AI is, I said it last week, it's a child you can't leave alone in a room unsupervised. AI can't predict the future without the data you feed into it. You need an advisor who knows the market, who's an expert in the market, who's defining the market. Every market, just so you know that we define in the aquarium, the very first thing the AI learns is a position paper written by the advisor themselves. So from that perspective, there is definitely analyst bias and opinion because we're writing it and we're picking the values that matter to us. But the data that we collect, we validate the data, we verify the data, and AI has a few problems. Not just the fact that it can't be supervised, it's too happy. I can't tell you how many times AI wants to give everybody's sevens, eights, and nines and not realistically look at the valuation. It wants to be happy and say that this feature is the greatest feature ever. And you'll look at the competition of that vendor and it'll say there it's the greatest feature ever. And so it requires an expert to intervene to be able to say this data isn't quite correct for this reason and adjust accordingly. Um, let me give you an example. The scoring is from 0 to 10. And under almost no circumstances should anybody ever get a 10. But there's a couple exceptions because you can always be better. But if it's a yes or no question, it might be a 0, might be a 10, or if it's partial, it could be like a 5 or a 6, depending on how much. For example, one of the pyramids we're touring around with is network segmentation. On this market, we're not sure if we're going to put it out yet or not, based on demand. And network segmentation is installing this solution doesn't require network re-architecture. And if it does, if it doesn't, well, that's a 10 because it can't get better than no change. But if it does, then, and it's major, well, that's a 1. Or if it's a minor, it's a 5 or a 6. And so you've got to keep that in mind. There is definitely some opinion that goes into it, but the majority of bias you see of, well, that last 20% or that public review where it's really an app store, we're not using those. We're using fact-based research and we're looking for your help and we're soliciting your help. Next question, Gary, this is back at you. Why did you approach Lionfish about building this?
So I think this really speaks to the fact that you have all the data at your fingertips. It's readily available. You have wide coverage, can jump into any market, and ultimately feed a platform with reliable and trustworthy data. And overcome some of, again, the perceptions of the current models. And so it was absolutely a natural fit. It was a kind of a no-brainer. I think we both felt that way.
Yeah, I'll even though it wasn't asked, I'll answer the reverse side of that. Why did we do it?
Yes.
Um, Lionfish is just under 35 former analysts. 35 former analysts couldn't agree on anything, except for maybe what the color of the sky is, and even that you would get shades of blue or turquoise or whatever. And so, what Four Quarters and Forecasters did for us was gave us this marketing direction and sales arm that we lacked. Lionfish is a very technical company with very smart, brilliant people who are all industry market leaders. And we have one salesperson, Lisa Hawk. And Lisa's great. She's amazing, but she's one. And so we needed a real proper sales and marketing firm to drive this for us. And quite frankly, somebody with a vision to put it together because that was something we lacked. We have the data, you have the expertise to make it a reality. So last question here, and if you have any more questions, please put it in the chat. What's your price for reprints?
If you'd like to learn more about that, yeah, so you can actually contact us at letstalk@fourquarters.com, and we can actually go through some options, but there are some options to choose from.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Roberta. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
have a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you might be. And with that, please feel free to reach out to us with any further questions or comments. Have a great day wherever you are.